Hey y'all, Jason here. Welcome to the second episode in the video series that we are doing on antique decorative hardware. Now this episode is going to be focused on basic light repairs and light maintenance of the hardware. We're going to talk about some of the more common problems that pops up, like doorknobs just coming off in your hand completely, to your front door latch being hard to turn or sticky. It's not going to be a full repair guide. This is basic light maintenance to diagnose kind of what the problem is. A lot of locks just need periodic maintenance, and we're going to show you how to do that. We're going to show you the tools and the products that you need to be able to perform this light maintenance on the hardware, and some of the more common problems that you run across with interior door locks. So let's get started with basic light repair and maintenance of antique door hardware. Before we get started looking at some of the problems that occur with locks, let's look at the tools that you're going to need to do light maintenance or light service on the door locks. One of the main things is small flathead screwdrivers. These are 1/8" tip screwdrivers. I recommend several different brands because 1/8" tip is going to be slightly different across the brands than the other. And there are a lot of hand-cut flathead screws that were used in antique decorative hardware. So this tip may work better than this tip on certain brands. Your main workhorse will be a 3/16 flathead. This is a cabinet tip, which is a narrower tip. The narrower tip allows you to get into a recess to be able to unscrew or tighten retainer screws mainly for mortise cylinders, but it's also used a lot to remove the flathead screws on trim, or even going far back on strike plates. There were flathead screws that held strike plates and the actual lock bodies in. As with any door hardware work, you will probably need a number 2 Phillips at some point, whether it be somebody has come along and replaced a screw before, but invariably you will always need a number 2 Phillips for something. A pair of pliers, the only real thing that you need a pair of pliers for is if you have to take your lock off and adjust the spindle. Sometimes the outer portion of the spindle is very difficult to unscrew, and it's good to have a pair of pliers to hold on to while you screw and unscrew to adjust the length. Now of course this won't be used when it's on the door, only in your hand, and usually only to adjust the length of the spindle if your spindle is not sticking out far enough for the other handle to grab onto. Another main thing that you're going to need is a set of Allen wrenches. You probably are going to need both standard and metric Allen wrenches. Standard in the US, metric for some of the overseas brands, some of the Italian brands like Deco. They use the metric, usually 2, 2.5, or 3. But with the standard, the most common one that you run across there is the 1/8" tip. That is on all bald ones. You can use the longer Allen wrenches, which does allow you to get up past the handle, makes it a little bit easier to unscrew, but I have found there's a lot of flex involved with the longer ones, and you still end up having to use the short side to fully tighten the screws down. So that is, primarily that's your choice as far as long or standard, but I prefer the shorter length. Either which way, you do have to reposition a lot of times the hex wrench several times to get it correctly tight. Loctite with those set screws, I highly recommend using Loctite on handle set screws. That is the one main thing that causes problems, is the set screw backing out or not very loose and not holding in. If you use a liquid Loctite, make sure you use the Real Deal Loctite brand and blue. Never use red. You can use purple, but I prefer the blue liquid. There is a paste version available out. I have done a few tests on this. I prefer the liquid, which is what I've always used. And we will go over that as we are taking off and tightening one. And the last thing will be a lubricant. You're going to need a good lubricant. I have done a full lubricant video. I'll post the link right here. This is one of the winners, and it is also the most easily found across many different stores, Tri-Flow, and you can get it in different size cans. So this is a winner, and you can also get LPS1 or Houdini. Those are more specialty lubricants that are harder to find. This one, like I said, is available at many stores, but you will need some paper towels to catch the overflow so that you don't make a mess, and just a small can of Tri-Flow. So let's get started with looking at some of the more common problems that you will run across that you will need these tools to fix. So let's get started with the more common problems of decorative antique hardware. So by far the one biggest problem that we hear is my knob came off in my hand. That is one of the most common issues. If you look at the underside of your doorknob, sometimes the screws are anywhere around, but they are supposed to be facing down so they don't collect debris in the slot or in the Allen head. However, if you look around, there are going to be screws somewhere on it that retain the knob to the spindle. Now, what you want to do is go ahead and take it off. If it was projecting far enough through the hole for the exterior to grab onto, then you are okay. If, for instance, it is not sticking out very far and the knob only barely goes on, you need to take the other side off and loosen the screws. This instance only has one screw. And we're not going to go real deep into spindles, but there are different spindles. This one does have a measurement, an index mark for the two different thicknesses of doors. But say, for instance, you had one with just 2 channels in each side. That can be put at any length. So if you push it in towards the knob, it is not going to stick out far enough here for the set screws to bite down onto. So what I do typically is I'll go ahead and take one set screw out. Sometimes there is only one, sometimes there's 2. Most bald ones have 2. And set it about halfway, assuming you have the correct spindle length period, and run it through your latch. And then when you slip your exterior knob on, you won't be able to see this on the camera, but if you look up in the hole with the flashlight, you should be able to see plenty of the tip of that going through the hole. So in other words, you don't want the end, see if I can see it, you don't want it on the very end. You want it a good at least 3/16 of an inch in for it to have enough to bite into. So that is why you would unscrew the exterior so that you can extend it out a little bit further. You're going to tighten the exterior down, run that through. Now again, there are many different kinds of rosettes, which we're going to cover in the rosette section of the series of videos. This particular one is for a 2 1/8 inch hole. Most of the time these do not get loose, but if they are, you can give them a little tweak. While you have your doorknob off, get your paper towel and your lubricant. Hold the paper towel on the back side and take your lubricant and just spray in the hole, which will get the inside of the latch. And go ahead and tighten. Once you've got your length adjusted, you want to go ahead and tighten your exterior down as hard as you can. And at this point, you're going to want to put Loctite on this screw. So typically what I will do would be to back this out far enough, get my bottle of Loctite, and then you want to carefully just drip some of it onto the screw. Now, never touch the tip of your Loctite to metal because that will cause it to gum up. But as long as you get some on your screw, it should be good. I'm going to start the screw, put it back out to the position it needs to be to, and then go ahead and tighten it down. And tighten it down till it is firm, and then give it one more crank. Wipe this off with your paper towel. Blue does stain, so you want to make sure and get it off of the hardware surface. Go ahead and run your spindle through. On your rosette, on the ones that screw on, you want to make sure they are fully screwed down and tight. Some Baldwin hardware has Mylar washers, which provides a smooth surface for the rosette, this portion of the knob to ride on. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. I'm gonna go ahead and loosen these screws before we put it on, and then we're gonna make sure, I'm missing one here. Go ahead and put your Loctite on this screw as well. Make sure your screw is angled correctly. You want to be going up into the groove portion of the spindle. So we're going to slide the knob on with the screw facing that. And then you can hold it. I'm holding it on both sides with my hands here. And you want to go ahead and tighten that screw down as much as you can, like this. And at that point, you're going to have to, once it gets firm, like we are right about there, you're going to have to reposition and turn it several times to be able to get a good tightness to the screw. And once you're firm and got it almost tight, you want to crank it down just a little bit more. Now the other type of spindle is the screw or the threaded spindle. That is infinitely adjustable. Therefore, it causes a little bit more problems when you're tightening them down or making sure the length is correct. However, if you have the right length spindle for it, for the most part, your non-threaded portion of the spindle, this middle section, is going to be what engages with the latch. So depending on the thickness of your rosettes, you will usually have 2 screws on the threaded spindles, sometimes just one, but again, if you have 2, you want to make sure that the flat of the spindle is in line with where your screw is. You don't want it to be at an angle like that, because your screw will tighten down, but as you use the doorknob, it will turn and twist and then be loose again, which can strip out this spindle. So the foremost thing is make sure on your outer portion that it is lined up with the flats of the spindle. And you want to tighten your screws down as with the other one. Run it through your latch. Again, make sure your rosettes are tight. And then come in with, again, if you have a washer, use the washer. If you don't, then don't. If you have a washer, by all means, put it in there. Now with oval knobs, it's very easy to see where it needs to go, because if it's like this, obviously it's going to be on the corners. But with round knobs, it's a lot harder to tell. If you tighten this down and tighten your screw in, and when you turn the latch does not come out fully or easily. That means that it is too tight on the door. So once you get at least one screw tightened down, you want to try your doorknob. And you see how it sticks in right there? It does not automatically spring back out. That is because it's too tight on the door. So you need to come back, loosen your screw enough to unscrew the knob one turn, or until it's loose. It may have a little bit of play right there, but as long as your screws are tight, that little bit of play isn't going to affect anything. which is the one main reason that you would want to have your Mylar washers. If you don't have the washers, or if you don't have access to them, we do, by the way, sell those washers. So if you're watching this and you need washers, feel free to contact us. But now that I've got it backed off, I'm going to tighten the set screw back down and try my knob again and make sure that it springs out. Of course, like we did with the other one, spray and lubricate the interior of the latch beforehand. You can also turn the knob and spray right here and on top of the latch, and then turn, and what that'll do is that'll carry the lubricant in on top of the latch and into the spring mechanism there. So when all's said and done, you should have a properly functioning with your screws at about the, say, 430 and about the maybe 630-ish, 730 position along the flats. Some of the bars are this way. Some of them are angled. In this particular one, with this particular latch, it is oriented this way. However, some are going to be oriented straight up and down like that. All dependent on the brand and the type of latch. So that pretty much covers the basics of lightly maintaining or keeping the knob from loosening on the door. Again, don't forget your Loctite on the screws, and your final tightening should be one good little, after it is firmly tight, you want to give it one good little more bend. Of course, don't strip, don't do it too much or force it, but that is the way to keep your knobs on the door and lubricate and fix the latch so that it is not as sticky. So let's go over a couple of little issues that you run across. Same thing with the antique doorknobs. You pretty much have the same issues. Most of the antique glass knobs have only one screw. With antique glass knobs, if you take your knob off your door and you hold it by this metal portion right here, if you can turn this glass and it's loose between the metal and the glass, unfortunately, that means it is past its day. It is actually a little bit dangerous. I've actually had a customer who turned really hard on a glass knob and it shattered along this area and sliced her hand open and caused major surgery and several months out of work with bad hands and nerve damage. So if you take your glass knob off, glass knobs are typically found on the interior doors of houses, but go through, hold the metal area here, and then wiggle, and that will tell you whether or not you may need to start hunting for a new glass knob. Now, of course, glass knobs are practically impossible to find real deal nowadays. There are acrylic versions available by several companies that look very similar, but they are not glass, they are acrylic, so there is quite a bit of difference there. Also, the brass and the machining is not near as quality as the real deal antiques were. If you are in an area, maybe check around town and see if there is a old house type depot or a place that brings in salvage and old stuff. A lot of times they will actually have bins of glass knobs. But when you're shopping for the glass knobs, which of course we're going to go over this in a whole glass knob video, but when you're shopping, don't forget to check your connection there. Okay, lastly, let's take a look at some Mortise locks and some light maintenance that you can do. It's very common for front door Mortise locks and even interior style Mortise locks to start acting kind of sluggish, real hard to turn the key, or very hard to turn the thumb turn or the key from the outside, or the latch is just hanging up. There are two different basic kinds of Mortise locks that you would find on, say, a front door. One of them has a plate, other one does not have a plate. On this particular one, we see one screw. Sometimes there are two screws side by side. Those screws hold the cylinders in. On this particular one, you don't see the screws in line with the cylinder, but you do see two other screws. So if you remove those two screws, they should be very short, small screws, 8/32 by very short. If you pop those 2 screws off and retract the latch, sometimes this is hard to get off of doors if it hadn't been off in a while, but you can hold the latch in and then kind of reach in and hopefully pop the plate off. Sometimes it is a little difficult. There we go. There's one side and there's the other. Once we remove that plate, we see that one screw that holds the cylinder in. Now with the Baldwin brand, we're going to be very careful with this. I'm actually only going to show you light lubrication because we're going to do a whole episode or probably 2 on Mortise lock repair, all the issues with them. Again, this is only light maintenance and repair. This is to fix it without really having to do anything besides maybe pull that plate off. But now that we have it out, one of the easiest things that you can do to make it work a little bit better, assuming your handles are tight, we follow the directions that we went over earlier with making sure the handles are tight. But if you pop that plate off or just have it without the plate, you can hold the latch in and take your straw and spray upward into the lock. And what that's going to do is that's going to coat the inside about in this area, which is where a lot of the gear mechanism is. You can also spray along the top of the bolt here and then cycle your key, and that will withdraw the bolt and again carry the lubricant in. With the Baldwin, after we take that plate off, the Baldwin actually has a couple of nice little gaps right here, so you want to run your straw in there. Be careful be careful it doesn't get jammed in there. But I'm going to put it in on each side going up and just give it a couple of little squirts. Then I'm going to pull the latch in and do the same thing and run it along the top of the lock, as well as put it in your keyhole just a little bit. Don't need a lot for the keyhole. Run your key in and out. It's very common if you don't come in your front door and maybe you never use your key, so sometimes that cylinder will seize up just from lack of use. So this is how you lubricate the cylinder to make it work correctly. And check your button mechanisms here, of course. If you use them, these buttons lock the exterior handle. That's what I call the lockout buttons. And lastly, get your paper towel. Where'd my paper towel go? Paper towel, and hold and spray right where the handle meets whatever trim is on the door on both sides. Make sure you have that paper towel to catch the runoff. Wipe down your lock and turn it on both sides. Now, again, we're going to go into heavier detail in a future episode on Mortise locks because there's a lot of other issues that can go on and they are fairly complicated. So that will be in a future video. But for now, this is just a way to lightly and easily see if just light maintenance will work with the hardware that you have and make it work easier. So extend the bolt, put your plate back on, make sure it seats there, and then tighten your screws back down. You do not need to overly tighten these, but it's just holding the faceplate on, and then after you get it on, you want to try both the key on the outside, the thumb turn on the inside, and both of the handles. Okay, y'all, so that is it on basic light maintenance and light repairs of door hardware, some of the common things that happens. We're going to go into detail in future episodes of each one of those things that I went over because there's a ton more information about each independent thing that I just talked about, and it's just too long for one video, so we're going to do that in separate videos. So if you didn't get your question answered on, say, a Mortise lock problem, stay tuned. Make sure you're subscribed with that bell notification on so that you know when we upload those future episodes. In the meantime, we appreciate you guys being here. Thanks again. We're going to go ahead and head out, and we will catch you on next video. See you soon.